your flesh and blood.
Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, new paradigms for a new world where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here 9 times a week, Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at all those times at richarddugan.com. We are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, as well as YouTube, where you can watch these conversations. I hope that you will take time to subscribe and click notifications so that when a new conversation is posted, you'll be notified and you'll be able to tune in, listen in, and learn, be entertained and inspired. A reminder that Choices, which is my book, 5 Steps for Life, it's available on Amazon.com in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle with Audible, soon to be released. We also ask that if you can support the work that we are doing financially, we do have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. And when they ask for an email address to whom you're sending, please go to richard@richarddugan.com. That's the email address. If you go to richarddugan.com, there is also a link directly to PayPal so that you can send us whatever support you can. And we thank you to those who have helped and to those who will help. We also ask that you take time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still, small voice. And with that, we now take you to our very special interview and guest here on Tell Me Your Story. And welcome to Tell Me Your Story. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us here on the program. We're going to sojourn to the tropics of sorts through the fine work of our very special guest here on the program. His name is C.J. Cook. And by the way, I'm going to give you the website right now because you're going to want to find out about his latest work, release date August 11, 2026. It's called Robert Lee Eskridge, Affable, I love that word, affable artist, author, and adventurer in Tahiti, Hawaii, Brazil, and beyond. And CJ, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for asking me to show up and talk about this, man.
Absolutely. Now, first of all, have you been to any of these places yourself?
Oh, yes. I've been to Tahiti, Hawaii lots, and to many other islands of the South Pacific. I like them. I like going to islands, and I like the South Pacific.
Now this is a book that has been illustrated. If I'm correct, who was your illustrator?
Well, the author. I mean, the artist.
There you go.
200 of his paintings are in the book, and then the rest of the material are photographs that follow his course. That I like to tell the story with lots of pictures. So there's over 500 photos and images in this book. Depicting his travels and his art.
Would I be remiss or maybe inaccurate is not remiss is not the right word, although it might apply. Inaccurate to say, because I'll tell you, the first person that comes to my mind when I think of all of these different attributes of your character, if you're of the person you've written about in this biography, of a painter and a writer and an adventurer and so forth, I think of Hemingway.
Yes, I think that's true. I mean, he was in the South Pacific and knew about it, and obviously wrote about catching fish and going, after a big marlin or whatever. But I think there's comparisons.
Why Eskridge? What is it about him that intrigues you to the extent that you said, I got to write this guy's biography?
Well, I ran across his name in my earlier books on André Lhote, who was a black velvet artist from Tahiti, and he knew Eskridge and vice versa, but I didn't know much about him. But what I did find out about him intrigued me because he was at the same time as my other artists that I've written about. So I decided to explore, and a thing that helped me a lot was one of my good friends who was a collector of art manuscripts. Picked up letters from Eskridge writing to his patron in Pennsylvania, And he gave me access to these letters. So these are original letters that he's thanking his patron for giving him money to get around the world to educate himself. And that way I got an insight to the man because in his own words, and there was about 80 of these letters. So that helped a lot.
Mm.
He was in the newspapers a lot because he was quite famous, and they were always writing about him, taking pictures of him. So that started it going. I knew about him from before my other books, same time period, 100 years ago, basically, and in the South Pacific.
Mm. And now I've been to your website, which again is southpacificdreams.com, which we will be linked to. And this is not your only output, if you will, the only book that you've written. You've put together quite a collection. You've got I like to say, you have quite a library. Talk to us a little bit about that before we dive further into this interesting gentleman, Eskridge.
Well, it started about 20 years ago when I bought a painting by a guy named Tyree, and there wasn't any information about him. And so I more or less was a newspaper reporting going. He died many years ago, and I had to go meet his family to learn his story. He had a wife and 7 kids, about my age at this time, and I interviewed him and learned his story and wrote his book, Ralph Burke Tyree, Artists of the South Pacific. So that was my first book. And what followed were other artists of the South Pacific from the same genre. And Lhote was the second, and so on. And there's 5 books now. I'm working on a couple more, all centered around the South Pacific. So it's just a fun adventure. I like the South Pacific, and these are lesser known artists that I'm trying to bring to light with their paintings and their stories.
Mm. Well, we all have our preferences as to where we'd like to live, the places that we'd like to visit, and so forth. I suppose that if I was to visit some of these places, for example, that you have visited, I would have no problem doing that, visiting them. I myself prefer the cold. Hence, I've made it no bones about the fact that I love going to Ireland in the wintertime. People think I'm nuts. But when you have grown up in the heat of Phoenix, Arizona, the cold atmosphere really appeals to me in that regard. It was funny too, because we were at one of these stone circles there in December of 2002. And all of a sudden it started to mist. Now, I had a shaved head then too. And I wasn't wearing a hat at that particular point in our journey. It was cold. I mean, it was ice cold. So we kind of named that our baptism by ice. It was wonderful. But you have found that the South Pacific is a great thing. Is it easy to travel to the various islands as well as countries? As far as I know, in terms of obviously the gentleman we're going to talk about here on this program, Eskridge, Tahiti and Hawaii and so forth. Those seemed like they would be easy to get to. You'd have no problem. Have your passport, you're good to go. Except for Hawaii, you don't need a passport there. At least I don't think you do.
No, it's a state.
Yeah. But if you go through the process of wanting to go to some of these islands, are there any challenges in that regard to where, well, gee, I need to go to this island because I want to get some background information for my next book or this book or that book or the other? Is that kind of the travel itinerary that you have when you go do you visit, or was this before you started to write all of these books?
Well, both. I'd been to Tahiti before this book,
Mm-hmm.
and I've gone a couple times since then while I was writing these books. No, it's easy to get to Tahiti. It's 8 hours from LA or San Francisco. It's 5 hours from Honolulu. You do need a passport because it's a French protectorate, but that's it. You don't need a visa or anything else. And all the islands of Tahiti are accessible by jet. If you go to some of the more remote islands, such as the Marquesas, which I've gone to, it's usually by ship. to get there. And again, it's a French protected and it's part of Tahiti, so you don't need to go through any, jump through any hurdles to get to see these places. But it's pretty easy this day and age.
When
Not
you
like
were,
Eskridge, Joe. Eskridge had up or go.
when you were writing these books and obviously thinking of what images, what pictures you were going to put in it, were you able to use his artwork? In this case, we're back to um, Erkridge.
Eskridge, yeah.
I beg your pardon,
Oh,
Eskridge.
right. Oh, yes. I mean, I got access. I had a few paintings of his, but most of them I came from the Bishop's Museum in Honolulu and the Honolulu Academy of Arts. And they each had about 25 of his paintings that I was able to get them to photograph and use in the book. And then I had a lot of connections in Honolulu from my other books, and they put me in touch with people that had his paintings. So I would go over to their homes and take pictures that are in the book. And then I had to put them in chronologically to his story. And that was the nature of how I collected them and learned his thing. They also, the Bishop's Museum also had a partial diary that he had written late in his life. So between the patron letters to this fellow in Pennsylvania that he wrote and his own diary, I could put his story together, first person, really, him describing where he was going and what he was doing.
Now, Robert Lee Eskridge, again, the book is entitled Robert Lee Eskridge, Affable Artist, Author, and Adventurer in Tahiti, Hawaii, Brazil, and beyond. Did you start from his very beginnings, like his birth or what have you? What was it that, because they say when you write a book, you need to grab the reader, like not just the first paragraph, like the first sentence. How did you grab the reader in your book to get them to say, oh, this should be interesting. I better read the rest of this?
Well, I just like you suggested it, I started with his big adventure in an island where he had gone native, so to speak, called Manga Reva, which is an island in the Gambiers, which is 1,000 miles east of Tahiti. I haven't been there. A friend of mine went there and gave me some pictures from that place that I used. But he heard about a cannibal king and where they were buried in Sinister Island nearby his Manga Reva Island. And he, with two friends, and this is how the first chapter starts, goes to find the tomb of these kings. And it was taboo, of course, to any of the locals, but they climb up a cliff and find the bones of these kings, including a cannibal king who would normally just eat prisoners from other warring groups. But when they were short of meat supply or human supply, he would pick on some of his own native boys and roast them up. So he was quite a character, well known and not well liked, as you could guess. But Eskridge finds his tomb and actually even brought back some knives and stone elements from that tomb. Probably not supposed to do that today, but he did, and they're in the Bishop's Museum, actually, in Hawaii, and I got access to them. So that's why I started with his adventure, finding the tomb of the cannibal king, and he was a brave guy. He would do a lot of stuff. Not a tough guy, but a brave guy.
Well, now I don't want to take the title away from you of being an artist, because you're right. That is an art. That is considered, in some instances, some circles. Do you paint or do you create other forms of art in your time?
No, I'm not an artist. I'm more of a historian, but I tell my stories with lots of pictures, just like Eskridge. Eskridge said, I need photos, I need pictures. He'd paint his pictures. He'd do some photography, but mostly he would just paint it to tell his stories. And I'm the same way. All my books are loaded with not only artist paintings, but maps that show him where they were and photos from that time period to depict his story, because that's the way I tell my story. So my art is the books. When the books get done, it's like my baby being born. I'm very, very happy with them because I've spent the time to be creative in telling the story of the man or the woman, and by my words and my pictures.
CJ Cook, my guest, the website southpacificdreams.com. The book we're talking about here on this program today is Robert Lee Eskridge, affable artist, author, and adventurer in Tahiti, Hawaii, Brazil, and beyond, here on Tell Me Your Story. Reverend Dr. D, along with CJ Cook. And CJ, tell us a little bit about your backstory in terms of, let's just say, before you wrote your first book, which was, let's ask you when. What were you doing? What was it that intrigued you that said, I got to write, I got to write. I got to talk about these people that are intriguing to me and so forth?
Well, I was always interested in writing. I'd written some scientific things in the past, mostly papers. I'd done little miniature biographies of some people for articles. So it was a big jump to go write a biography, a book, a nonfiction book about somebody. But it was really, really fun, and I got hooked on it to do it. It's the same sort of thing of any kind of scientific exploration. You have to, go find the answers and dig them out and record them and make it as accurate as possible. And that started me on this hunt to tell stories and of real people and located in a niche area of the South Pacific and only artists. So that's my little niche.
Yeah. What do you share within the context of these biographies? Because you've written how many?
5.
5. Do you incorporate any of their, shall we say, internal searchings? We can go ahead and put in the context of their inner walk, their spirituality, their philosophy that they lived by. Because it sounds like this guy, he had a philosophy, but it was kind of open.
He was an adventurer. He was an artist and an adventurer. That was probably the attributes that carried him. But he liked to write. He was not very successful in the writing. He had a number of books that never got published that he wanted to share. He had 3 that he did publish, and then he illustrated another 5 or 6. But his attributes were his seeking adventures and tried to tell stories with his art and his words. And that's sort of like me. There was a lot of me in him. I like the adventures of the South Pacific and going to islands and learning about the people, learning about the history. I'm really into the history, why they end up there, who came there first, to these various places. And Tahiti is, of course, the central part of this, at least at the beginning of Eskridge's life. And to learn about Wallace Bougainville was the first French guy to go there to Tahiti, and then James Cook came later. But that's part of the story, to learn about that history, because it incorporated in all these books a little bit about that history, because it applies to the artist and why he was there. I mean, Eskridge probably had a little bit of Gauguin. He wanted to go be like Gauguin and do some of the same things. So did Lhote. They wanted to go native and see the natives and be with the natives, if you will, of Tahiti.
Was your family at all interested in the tropics, the South Pacific, and so forth, or was that just you? Is it like, hey, you came into this world, maybe you lived a previous life on one of these islands, and it intrigued you?
No, I was laughing at your story about the cold. Well, I grew up in Wisconsin, and that's cold, really cold, worse than Ireland, which I've been to. And so I came out to San Diego many, many years, more than 50 years ago. And so I came out because I wanted warmer weather and I wanted the ocean. And gradually, Hawaii is, just a short 5-hour flight away, and got hooked on that. And my wife and I and the kids go there 4 or 5 times a year to just relax. I write there. And then I started exploring a lot of I had an opportunity to go to quite a few of the South Pacific islands, and I've enjoyed them. Each of the peoples are different. The nature of how they get there, of course, is quite similar. But that kind of got the bug. It's the tropics, it's islands, it's warm water, warm seas, and snorkeling, scuba diving, and animals of the sea. You're missing, 3/4 of the earth is down there, and you get to go see it. And the big giant blue Pacific is, of course, the biggest and the best.
Hmm. I'm also curious as to the people that you choose. How do you come up with the different and in this case you've got 5 books, 5 biographies. How you came up with each one of these people? And let's stay focused for the moment on Robert Lee Eskridge. What was it about his life? Was there a particular event within his life that intrigued you to the point where you say, I want to tell this guy's story?
I ran across him. I mentioned in the Edgar Lhote book,
Right.
and I didn't know much about him. A friend of mine had a letter where he was helping another artist to learn about art and to evaluate his art. And he said, "Go work with Lhote." So they knew each other, and one of his friends actually helped Lhote in his career too. So they helped each other because they were the same genre, the same writing from this, doing painting from the same place. But and so I ran across his story. Not only that he had been to Tahiti, but I didn't know all the details, how many times he went to Tahiti, but I knew about a little bit about his travels. And it sounded interesting. He just sounded like a fascinating guy. I mean, he went to Tahiti 4 times before he even went to Hawaii, where
Mm,
he finally settled. And that's crazy. And this is 100 years ago. Yeah, to get to Tahiti, he lived a little bit of time in San Diego when he was young. He got some of his education at USC in art, but a lot of it was from Chicago. And to get to Tahiti, he had to take a three day train trip across from Chicago to San Francisco, and then a 10-day steamship to get to Papeete, Tahiti. So that's one way, 2 weeks to get there, basically. So and he did that, 4 straight times. Each summer he would come back to Tahiti. So that's a little different than the 5-hour trip or the 8-hour trip that we would take today. So you have to hand it the guy. He had a drive to do something
yeah.
that is so different than people would think about today.
As
We just go
far
over there to sit on the beach.
Right, as far as you know, are there people that you are aware of, or maybe you know them personally, who are living that kind of a life today, or do you think that's even possible that people can do what people like uh, Eskridge did in his life, as well as some of the other people you've written about? It seems like the times have changed to the extent that it's not as easy to do because of the technology and so on and so forth.
Well, you can get around easier now, and of course, I have a friend who's a National Geographic photographer, so he travels all over the world taking
Mhm.
pictures for National Geographic, and he'll post his stuff online, and but he's got somebody taking care of him, and I think that would be a good example. I'm sure they have many reporters or photographers going out to do stories and take pictures and write about them for their magazine and their online presence today. So it's just easier nowadays. They where are there artists like that? I don't know.
Mm.
Painters. I don't know. I haven't looked into that. I've stuck to the 100-year-old guys and gals.
I'm curious as to whether or not he had any offspring, if he had relationships in these different islands and 3 different oceans and so forth. If he left any kids behind, you know.
No, I not that I know of. He got married late when he was 60 plus, and that was probably more financially relevant. But he didn't. He had no offspring that I learned about.
Hmm, interesting.
So pretty much a bachelor guy.
Yeah. Now, in terms of his art, his paintings, um, does he get a special designation for the style, or did he emulate other styles? Uh, because in his time, obviously, technology, we didn't have the communication in his day like we do today, to where he would be exposed necessarily. Although, again, Maybe he learned, for example, there are a couple of artists I keep thinking of. With the one that lost his ear, um, took cut off his ear, didn't lose it, he cut it off,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so forth. And obviously, the Europe was a big, shall we say, stomping ground for artists. 100, 200 years ago, and so forth. What about his style? Does he get his own name? It's um, it's Eskridge, it's Cubist, it's this, it's that, or was he kind of emulating some of the other styles that already existed in his day?
Well, he trained basically at the Art Institute in Chicago, and like I said, a little bit in California. And then his patron helped to pave the way so he could go to France. And he worked with a Cubist master named André Lhote, and he was with him for a few months. And that was the era of Art Deco. So he picked up some of both of those traits, but it's his own. Nobody else paints like him. It's his palm trees are Art Deco-ish. They're not realistic. His people are. They're more. There's a little cartoonish part about them with the bigger heads in their bodies. They're not in a realistic sense, but he can. There are cases where he did realistic thing for other books and stuff, so he could do it. He would do illustrations for other books, and they'd be quite realistic. But his style was that, and mostly watercolors. But he would do some big oils too that are in the book. And he did murals. He was quite a muralist. His first one was when he came back from Europe in the Palmer Hotel in Chicago, where he painted the ceiling with murals of Marco Polo, which I don't have any access to because they painted over him, and he never even got a copy of them. He wrote to the hotel 1 month after they painted over, 40 years after he painted it, and asked them to send some photo of his paintings, and they said, "Well, I'm sorry about that, Bob. We painted over your murals." But he
Yeah.
does have some that remain. There's a sports pavilion in Honolulu, and he painted giant 20-foot Hawaiian athletes in two big murals there. It's not open at the present. The Hawaiians are taking care of other problems inside there, and it's closed. But the paintings are there and viewable to the public once they open it up again. So those have been there since the 1930s that he painted. So you can see a big Eskridge mural someday when they open it back up again in Honolulu.
CJ Cook, and the website is southpacificdreams.com, and this is Tell Me Your Story. I'm talking with CJ Cook, and CJ, I wanted to ask you a little bit about some of the writings. Well, actually, before I ask you that, what is it that those who are listening and are watching might have seen of Eskridge's work, or if obviously if they pick up a copy of your book, they're going to see that work. But are there any places, let's say here in the States, where people say, "Oh yeah, I have seen his work. I have seen it here or there," or is he more obscure?
There's not any place, the Honolulu galleries, the Honolulu museums have copies of his work, not copies, they got original pieces of his work. Not that I'm aware of in California. He painted in California, especially later in his career, because he settled in Washington State and did paint California scenes late in his career. But there's, they'd be one of type of deals in the various museums around California, much more accessible if you go to Honolulu. So not so much. You'll have to get the book to see his paintings, but he's very, very good. And
Yeah.
he tells us he would paint the people to tell their story. He wouldn't try to make them glorify them in any other different way. He wanted to depict them doing what they did in their work, fishing, and he liked watching them fish, both netting fish and fishing on the shore with a line, or doing the hula in various countries. And he would depict that surfing. He's got lots of pictures, paintings of his surfers in Honolulu later in his career. But he also has gambling casinos from not Las Vegas, Reno, and assorted areas along the border between California and Nevada. Because late in his career with his wife, he would tour these places and paint what he saw, just to depict it.
I'm curious as to the work that he left behind. Not only the paintings, but he had also written. What was his library like as far as his output?
Well, he had 3 books that he wrote. The big one was about Manga Reva, where he spent 8 months with the natives, just learning their cooking and working with them, fishing with them, and then telling stories about a crazy priest that kind of ruined their country 100 years before he got there. We talked about the king's tomb. He wrote about that, and all that's in his book Manga Reva. Then he wrote a kid's book about that stay, and he did a couple others that were about Hawaiian kings and their story, both for kids and for adults. And then he illustrated a bunch of books, usually about the tropics. Early in his career, he even was into other things, but mostly it was because of his expertise in painting and drawing the tropics. They'd asked him to illustrate books.
In your research, what did you find out about this guy? What kind of a guy was he?
He was a very thin, probably only about 5'9" guy. But he just seemed to have a very bold adventure attitude about himself. He'd mostly travel these places alone. Sometimes he'd go with a buddy, but usually just to get there, and then he'd be on his own. But he made friends. The affable part came about because wherever he went, he was a charmer. He was just such a nice guy. Everybody loved him and would take him in. The natives loved him, and he had this, and the women loved him wherever he went. He got to know a princess of Tahiti, an old queen of Tahiti, a princess in Hawaii, who helped his career a great deal by getting him to paint a mural for the 1933 World's Fair in Chicago. And she liked his book and therefore liked him. And she made sure that he was the muralist for the 1933 Chicago World's Fair in telling a Hawaii story. And even beyond that, George O'Keeffe came to Hawaii, and he was more or less her guide. She was there for 3 months, and he set up her tour. And when she left Hawaii, she gave him her paints and easel, and it's a thank you to Robert Lee Eskridge. So that was quite a thing. But people said, you must be a rich guy because you're always staying in fancy people's houses. And he said, oh, no, I'm not rich. I wish I was rich. Just because I stay in these people's house doesn't make him rich. And he was just rich with friends. And he would get by staying in a little hut on the beach in Hawaii or Tahiti. But often somebody would invite him in New York or Florida or Hawaii to their homes to stay for a month to paint a painting or paint a mural and enjoy life with them. But they wanted to be around this famous artist, and so that's why they would do that. But he had his many different friends. Edgar G. Robinson, the actor, was one of his buddies, and Robinson's wife was a painter, so he would help her. But they would travel together. He would stay at their house. So he had actors, Hollywood people liked him, movie stars liked him. It was amazing, affable guy that people wanted. He was knowledgeable, so they wanted to talk to him. He had been to lots of places. They liked his art. He would usually, paint something for him while he stay in their house. So I guess that was their benefit to get this artist to come, and everybody got to do that. Grauman's Chinese Theater. He got to go there one year, but Grauman himself invited him to come to the theater to see his place down there in LA. So That's an example of his affability and his ability to meet lots and lots of people.
Do you find that a lot of artists, especially maybe in that period, um, I mean, their output was sometimes very prolific. Was his?
Yes, yeah, he had painted thousands of watercolors, not hundreds probably of oil paintings. He didn't like doing oil paintings so much because it took him too much time. Um, so his output, but he didn't make much money. I mean, even today, most of his paintings are in the $1,000 range, and they were probably in the $100 range or less back in those days. So it wasn't. He had to paint quite a bit. That's why he illustrated books, as that was a way to get money. And he was always so excited if he could sell a few of his paintings. He didn't do lithos, so there was no manufacturing of his paintings like many artists do today. It was, an original basically, and so he had to be productive with his watercolor to make any money. So staying in people's homes or writing books, or he taught at the University of Hawaii and at USC at various points in his time to give him a little income. But he survived on his art, and whether it's teaching at these places, writing a book and making some money off them, or his paintings. So it was nobody gave him much. The patron helped him get his education, but again, it was only a couple $1,000s to get him over there, and never very not giving him a salary or anything like that.
So he would be under that same banner of starving artist, so to speak, or almost
Yeah.
starving artist.
Correct. I mean, he was always worried about. In fact, he almost died of an ulcer when he was in Hana, because it just his nerves. He would talk about. He smoked a lot too. So he didn't drink, but he smoked quite a bit, a pack or more a day. It didn't seem to shorten his life because he lived to be 83. He was a tough bugger. But he almost bled out from an ulcer there. But the family that he stayed with helped him through it, and he had a blood transfusion and all too. So he was always a little worried about. He may not have always reflected it in his letters, but you could see it that he was worried about where he's. He would make a note of that he's got to keep going, and I'm not rich, even though people think I'm rich because I stay in somebody's fancy home. And so he was surviving on his art.
I think about some of the authors I've read. I'm not real big into biographies myself. Although I've jokingly said that if anybody has ever followed my career for the past 47 years and listened to my interviews, they could write my unauthorized autobiography. Okay. What about your adventures? Would you, let me put it this way. We've seen all of the various programs where a film crew will follow an individual around. I can't remember the genre now. For some reason, the name escapes me. But if my life, for example, if my life were live on TV, I wouldn't watch it. Okay. Now, it's interesting to me. Okay. But, I just, I don't know. But what about you? Do you feel that your life has been such? I mean, you've shared stories from other people, but what about your story of your life? Is that something that you've thought about in terms of maybe, as I talked about this on other programs, leaving a legacy? There's a great Jewish rabbi who I interviewed, wrote a book called "What Will They Say About You When You're Gone?" So, what do you want them to say about you when you're gone, as far as what you are, so to speak, leaving behind? Not that you're going anywhere soon. Okay.
Well, I've had a great medical career before I got into this writing, and did a lot of research, and those procedures that I wrote about are being used, worldwide today. So I was quite proud of that, but I changed over to my retirement career job, and in this realm of writing about these artists, and have won awards for two of my books on biographies. I hope this one wins an award. I got a silver medal on the book about Edith Butler, who was a colorist during in Hawaii in the same time period. So I'm quite proud that I was able to change careers and win awards in that. And people know me from this genre of writing about these artists. All these people in Hawaii that collected Eskridge are aware of my books, and I've got two or three other stories to tell yet. So I got to stay healthy. I don't have time to worry about myself. I got to get out there and write these other stories. Somebody else can worry about that down the line. But I've had a good life of adventures. Most people haven't been able to travel where I've been able to travel, and I was able to do a lot of traveling to Europe and other places. But the South Pacific was what I enjoy the most. And I've had a few diving adventures and some that scared the heck out of me, but not enough to be like what Eskridge went through. One of his stories was he was in Hawaii in 1941 and he wanted to go to Brazil. So he taught himself, went to classes to learn Portuguese so that he could talk to the Brazilian people, which is not Spanish, but Portuguese. And then got on a Japanese combination freighter and a small section for the tourists to be on, mostly third class tourists. And they took off in July 1941 first to LA and then down the Pacific, down the South American coast to Chile. And then this boat came back, and then that boat was relegated to the Japanese Navy because of an impending attack on Pearl Harbor. So he had the last boat to Chile on a Japanese cruise, but the mountain was closed. So then he got in a Chilean freighter and went around Magellan's Point, the Straits of Magellan, to get to Brazil and Rio de Janeiro, and then spent a year in Brazil painting and learning the culture during the beginnings of the World War II, and meeting artists and doing it. Just, crazy stuff, but all by himself. And just surviving on his knowledge. Is like I would never do that, and probably most people wouldn't do that. And this big old freighter with a bunch of Chilean sailors or Japanese guys that were taking him around the world.
What's next on the hit parade? Who are you going to write about next?
Well, we've got a couple books pending. We're working on a New Zealand painter who did black velvets named Charlie McPhee. And right now I'm writing with another friend a book about Quinn's Bar. Quinn's Bar is in Papeete, or was in Papeete, Tahiti. And it was the wildest, craziest bar in the Pacific. Better than Don the Beachcombers or Trader Vic's. And it foreshadowed all those. And you'll have to, it's an adventure by itself. And Lhote was there. So that's how I knew about the bar, because that's where he'd go find his girlfriends, so to speak, to bring to his estate on Moorea, which is a neighboring island where he had a sort of a Playboy mansion, if you will. 20 years before there was a Playboy mansion, he had his own estate of little casitas where he'd bring his girls over for painting and other pleasures. So we're writing about Quinn's Bar, this famous bar that's now all gone, but the people that were there, run by a woman named Marcel, who surprisingly was the lady in charge of it that nobody knew about. So you will know about her soon. So that was kind of a fun story to see. Well, she was a tough lady and ran this bar for 40 years and knew how to make money and do things. And yet she was very talented too. So it'll be a good story.
I would take it that where you're living now kind of helps keep you semi close to the tropics, not just so much in distance, but in terms of environment on the West Coast here.
We live inland about 15 miles from the ocean. So it's, you can't see the ocean. We get ocean breezes, but it'll get, in the winter, because it's a little higher elevation, it'll get in the 30s at night. It never snows, but 40 is probably the routine temperature at night. But like today, it'll be 80 and very, very pleasant. Sort of like, well, it's probably a little hotter than where you live in Northern California, but yeah, very, very pleasant.
Yeah. Well, I know that I can tell you I have experienced sort of kind of tropical weather when living in Phoenix in July and August with the monsoons. The humidity goes up.
Yep.
What about that aspect of traveling Did that obviously did never bothered you? You like that because it's something that just really appealed to you.
Well, Hawaii's nice because they get the trade winds, and it's
Hmm.
like a gentle breeze blowing, so that even when it's 85, it's not too humid. And of course, you're right on the ocean, so it keeps it cool. Tahiti's a different story. They don't have the trade winds, so their 85 is quite humid. And if you're inland, you're sweating. You're very uncomfortable. It's just so stinking beautiful. If you've ever seen the pictures of Bora Bora, Tahiti is very interesting because they're volcanic like Hawaiian Islands, but the subsoil is soft, and the volcano gradually, kind of over millions of years, is sinking, and that forms a reef. The outer edge of the volcano becomes a reef around it. And Bora Bora is almost a classic example because the volcano is almost gone, and it's mostly just a big reef around it. And then the Tumotos are just reefs, and there's 80 of these giant reefs north of Tahiti where these artists went to and painted and so on, and were quite familiar with, including Eskridge. And it's the most interesting because the volcano's gone and it's just the reef, and people live there.
Hmm.
And so it's very fascinating from a geographical, and sort of another part of what you get to learn when you're down there, because you appreciate, having been to all these places, I appreciate where he went and how he painted from the people, and describing in it as Art Deco fashion. You'll see fantastic pictures, paintings that he did from these areas in the book. So it's fun because you have to understand, how the islands formed, how the people got there, and the Hawaiians came from Tahiti. So they brought the hula they brought the people
Yeah.
to Hawaii. So it's all part of the migration that came probably from Taiwan and China originally
Well,
through that. So understanding that is also part of the story.
I also know too, there's a little bit of controversy regarding Hawaii and its culture, and it's becoming a state because much of its culture was not appreciated and so forth. It is today, I think, more so. But there are
Yes.
those who would say, you know what, because of what happened, we really don't want to be a part of the United States because of what they did when made us a state. What do you know about that?
Well, of course, that happened in the 1890s when
Yeah.
they imprisoned the Queen, and the group of the Dole pineapple family and others took over with a little help of some military, and just without a fight, basically took over. And then years and years later, they became a state in 1959. But there's a group of the Hawaiians that wish no white man was there yet. But you could say the same about American Indians too,
Sure. Yeah.
that their land was, taken over. You
Yeah.
hear you hear it on
And
Hollywood all the time.
yeah. And again,
That
you're
we're losing
talking
them.
about a different time, a different way
Yep.
of living, of thinking, and on and on and on. And the one thing that I have come to the conclusion of, CJ, is that we cannot overlay our present day, how do I put this, way of being. I could say we can't overlay our present day values and morals and so forth on history because that's not the way it was. That's why I
Sure.
had a real
No.
problem, for example, because I think this still applies. When I heard the stories about how they're going to change Mark Twain's Huck Finn, taking out all of the offensive language of today. And I'm going, what are you doing? That's the way they spoke back then.
Right. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts in that regard to, I mean, am I wrong in saying it's rewriting history?
No, you can't do that. I mean, Lee Tag was a racist. He grew up in Arkansas, and he loved the Tahitian girls, but he thought the men and women were not that bright, so to speak,
Yeah.
and didn't respect them even though they were. And so you can't change it. You just record the history the way it is.
Yeah.
And same thing about. I mean, Estridge was a wonderful man, but he smoked like a fiend, but nobody knew that. that it was that bad, because that was all covered up a bit about the dangers of smoking until, the 70s, when it, at least American populations appreciated it too. So yeah, you just can't change. You can't have your morals of what happened even 30
Yeah.
years ago, let alone 100 years ago, because all these stories take place 100 years ago.
Yeah. Well,
So it's a different era.
and what was Robert's longevity?
He lasted like 83, and he
Wow.
was he was going back to paint. They asked the mural I talked about that's in Honolulu that you can eventually see again. Is exposed. It's under a building, but the building has big vents from the ocean, so it's feeling salt, all the salt water, salt humidity in the air, and has to be repainted every 10 years. And so they asked him to come back to paint. So here's this 80-year-old man that was going to climb up ladders and repaint. So he came back, stayed in the hotel with his wife, and dropped over with a heart attack the day before he was going to paint in Honolulu. And so that's the kind of character he was. He was always teaching, grading art, writing about art, even in newspapers in Washington when he had kind of retired and was living with his wife, but was going to repaint his mural and collapsed on the bed in the hotel and died. So he was a tough bugger, and for all his life, and smoking and ulcer problems, but very tough, very tough.
Where was he laid? Where was he laid to rest?
Back in Olympia, Washington. They had
Okay.
a service there, but where his wife was quite wealthy and had connections there. So that's part of the reason why he had, I think, got married. To be honest, he had a nice house finally late in his career. So
Yeah,
it
and
was a
throughout his
different.
career, though, did he have a specific home base? Because it sounds like when somebody is an adventurer like him and he's traveling all over the place all the time, it doesn't really have a place to call home, central location, so to speak.
Hawaii was until the
Was
war.
okay.
Yeah, he came to Hawaii in 1932, and like I said, he was painting, but he was also teaching at the University of Hawaii up until the war, when he took off to go to Brazil in 1941, and then couldn't get back because of the war until after the war in 1946. Came back to Hawaii. So that was, he didn't have a house, so there was no house that
Yeah.
he always was living in somebody's little casita on their land or in their house, or he'd rent a cottage on the beach. He had no house until he got married late in his career. So there's no place to go see. Although the people that saved him when he had an ulcer, he painted this giant mural in their house in Honolulu. I got to see, and it's in the front and back pages of the book. That's just awesome. It's about 7 feet tall and 16 feet wide, and it's in their house, and so it's not open to the public. But he was very happy with his family and always gave them paintings and painted this beautiful mural in their house too. So that's not his house, but it's close to it in the sense that they have a lot of his art there. But he's a remarkable guy. Just his stories. It just he teaches you how to be tough and go do your thing, and he did that way before internet or anybody know where you were. Even there's no phones or nothing. He just got on a boat and took off.
And off he went. Is his
Yep.
work today valuable, or does it really depend upon who you talk to?
It's becoming more valuable. His oils, in when you see them sold at auction, go in the 30 to 50,000 and over 100,000.
Oh,
So his oils are pricey. The
ah,
watercolors, I've seen them in the range of 1,000 to 5,000. But you can get little, prints and stuff that are original, but they were just small pieces that he did, and those might be $100. So it's a big range that he is. Now, will it go up in value? Yes, it will go up in value, because the book will help it go up in value. Once you have the story out there,
yeah.
and I know that from Tyree and Leeteg, and even Edith Butler, I wrote about. It changes, because now you have some notoriety, and people know about them, and and appreciate the artist more when there's a story about them.
I mean, the old
So
saying.
buy some now. Buy some now.
Okay, I'll do my best. I'll pull out the old checkbook and see what I can do.
Well, there's a couple on eBay, so you can pick them up.
Yeah, not too bad. Yeah, it's all usually the saying is, that the artist's work doesn't really garner much of anything as long as they're still alive. It's only after they're dead that the price goes up, and that's
Gauguin. Gauguin's a good example. I mean, he had all these beautiful paintings that are multi-million dollars now, but they were there's a great story. Gauguin came to Tahiti in 1891, I think it was, when he first came back, and he died in 1903 in the Marquesas. I saw his grave there, and there's no original art of Gauguin there. There was a little shack where he used to live in Tahiti, and when he went off to the Marquesa Islands, he had left a bunch of paintings and junk there, and they tried to auction it off, and they sold a couple pieces for less than $20 art, and the rest of the stuff they burned the shack and dumped it in the ocean. So there was a lot of Gauguin pieces that went into the blue sea as ashes, because nobody wanted the junk, and nobody appreciated that he's doing cartoon characters down there. And this is all happened in 1903, and you could have picked up a few pieces for $20 there. So you never know. He didn't, people knew about his story, but they didn't appreciate his art till 30, 40 years later, probably.
Yeah, yeah. And I'll bet you that the ancestors of those, and unless they were still alive at the time, the ancestors of those who dumped it into the sea probably wish they hadn't.
Yes, I know that the guy, his name is Norman, and he would tell that story and tear up when he tell the story. He was 12 at the time. His daddy told him to get rid of the stuff and burn it, and so he lived a long time and told the story many times about how his dad said, "Get rid of that junk. It's on my property. Burn that hut."
The biggest connection I have, and it's not anything other than a personal connection with Vincent van Gogh, is, of course, his painting Starry, Starry Night. But it was a girl that I was dating for a very short time back in the late 70s, who had put together this presentation for school about Starry, Starry Night. And every time I hear that song, of course, I think of her, So that's the only connection I have to something of that significance. I want to ask you real quickly, because I think it was mentioned earlier on in the program, black velvet paintings.
Mm-hmm.
I happen to have one that I've had probably for, I don't know, maybe 40, 45 or 50 years. That I've got. I still have it here when we moved from Santa Barbara. When we moved from Phoenix to Santa Barbara to Twin Peaks, I still have it. I haven't decided whether I'm going to put it up on the wall or not, of this woman, well-endowed woman, from a little below the bust line up, dark hair, and so on and so forth. What is it about, from your perspective, your knowledge, what is it about that particular genre that intrigues people such? Because obviously for me, it was more the picture of the woman as a young man that I bought that thing, and I can't remember how much.
But do you know who painted it?
I actually don't. I'm gonna have to. Maybe what I can do is take a picture of it and send it to you, and
sure.
And you can see if the signature's on there. I'll look at it as well.
Yeah, if it was done in the in the era of these guys. I mean, Lhote was the guy that started it, and my first three books were all about black velvet. So I'm one of the experts on black velvet history in the South Pacific. So Lhote got into it because he admired Rembrandt, and Rembrandt in his paintings would have paint a black background to make the portrait pop. Mm-hmm. And Lhote said, "Screw that! I'll start with black and just put the portrait on there." And he was in Tahiti, so his subjects were these. He did a few men, but mostly naked women or partially dressed women. And mm-hmm. his people he was selling to were our American troops there. That we had sailors going there because they in Tahiti they were stationed at Bora Bora because that's where the Americans built a airport so they could bring the troops, and they didn't want the Japanese to take over Tahiti, so they built a base basically on Bora Bora, and the sailors would come over to the bars, Quinn's Bar, and it'd buy paintings of Leetag during the war. And then when they came home, they had these, paintings of it. But long story short was that at the same time, people started into the tiki crowd, Don the Beachcomber we mentioned, and Trader Vic's, because the public, mainly the sailors, wanted in Hollywood, wanted to have this tropical place to go with nets and fish and tropical drinks and Mai Tai. And the dark background with a little light on the black velvets became part of the scenery of these bars and restaurants back in the 40s and 50s. So that really started it, and it's continued on today with big shows all around the country of tiki people, and tiki mugs, and so on. But that's the connection with the black velvet, came from the South Pacific at the same era after the war that sailors and the public that visited Hawaii wanted to see.
Well, there's something for everybody out there. No question about it.
Yep.
Someone is creating a piece of art, whether it's on canvas or out of stone or clay, or for example, there's an event that happens in Santa Barbara every Memorial Day. It's called I Marinari, and it's chalk drawings on the parking lot. And some of these people are just incredible artists. Oh my heavens. You would sit there going, there's got to be a way to preserve this, and maybe put it up on a wall. Well, the only way you're going to do that is if you take a picture of it and put it up on a wall. Okay. Because when the first rains come, it's gone.
It's gone. It's like making sandcastles on the beach too.
Same thing, huh? Exactly. Yeah. I love the Buddhists who make those mandalas, this colored sand. And then when they're done, they sweep it all up and so forth. How'd you like to be the one saying, okay, here's the sand from that mandala. I need you to separate out all of the grains of sand into the right colors. Give me a microscope and a pair of tweezers. Yeah. But again,
everybody's got their art choices. Yeah,
it's incredible. Well, art choices, because there's so many people who are creating so many different of those art choices. And hey, I thank you so much for bringing it to light. And before we wrap up, or I should say, before you and I go, I will see if I can't snap a picture of it, send it to your email so you can take a look at it and see if it's of any significance. I don't know that I'd necessarily want to sell it, but by the same token, hey, who knows? That's assuming it has any value beyond sentimental value that I bought it as a young man.
If it's Tyree or Leetag, it will have value for sure.
Well, we'll find out here in a little while. I thank you so much for being on the program as we continue talking with CJ Cook here on Tell Me Your Story. As we wrap things up here on the program, CJ, I want to thank you once again for joining us, and a reminder our listeners to go to southpacificdreams.com. That's with an S at the end. South Pacific Dreams will be linked, and get a copy of the book entitled Robert Lee Eskridge, and that's the affable, I love that word, affable artist, author, and adventurer in Tahiti, Hawaii, Brazil, and beyond. It's really been a pleasure to have this conversation to educate me a little bit more on some of this. I mean, I produce Elizabeth Stewart's program on the station, Arts and Antiques, and she has all kinds, yourself and others on the program. And I got to tell you, I'm going to shoot and see what I can do to get a PhD through her of eclectic studies, because 66 years of age, it's not, I finally realized, I don't really care much for poetry. Actually, I do, because the poetry that I listen to has been put to music. So you just never know where your tastes lie until you do a little in-depth study. And thank you for sharing with us your in-depth study of Robert Lee Eskridge.
Eskridge. Eskridge.
Eskridge.
Thank
I
you.
beg your pardon. I'll get it right. Eskridge.
Yeah, it's been fun. Really good conversation. There's more to the Eskridge name too at the second chapter in the book that I won't tell you now, but
Oh.
it's related. It's related to George Washington.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. I love
Read
how it's
read chapter 2.
all right. I will read chapter
It's
2.
very
By the
simple
way, is
too,
your
and
book, though
you'll know.
I know it has pictures in it. Is it something that's affable? That's not the right word. Does it work for Audible, or is it too picture oriented that it really wouldn't work real well?
Yeah, it's picture oriented, but it's still a good enough story. I actually did one myself through Elevens. It's a website where you can record your own. So I did the whole book myself through there, and then you can pick up different people to read the different chapters. I even found a link to George O'Keeffe, so I got her voice doing the George O'Keeffe chapter.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
and they mimic her, and Winston Churchill is in there too. So you can find people, including yourself, to do the introduction. I didn't have Eskridge himself because I didn't have his voice anywhere, but famous people you can put in there and use their words, and the computer mimics them. So I did this. It was an audio book, but I haven't. Yes, yeah, the AI thing. You can pick and choose your voice, and including your own. And so I did the book for myself. I haven't tried to put it out there. Amazon won't take it that way. They only want real people doing it yet, but I think that will change.
Yeah, well, I can understand that. I sure can, but I think that's going to change because I have used AI for a couple things. Number one, once I got over the bugaboos with one of my guests who uses AI to write his fiction, and he says I only use AI to do the first draft. And as I use the analogy, he then takes that ball of clay created by AI, and then he molds it into the shape that he wants. So it's really his. I've had AI help me to do my taxes. Now, they don't do the work. I can't take them to an audit, but they help me because they have access to the instructions in an instant. I'm on line 11 and it says, da-da-da, what am I supposed to put there? And it'll pull up the instructions that say blah, blah, blah. So, and now I'm using it for this program to sometimes create a little outline of points that I want to talk about, even though I will still state that the universe asks the questions. I'm just along for the ride. And so, I use it for other programs as well. And it's fascinating to play with. And it's a tool. Okay. It's just like a hammer. Okay.
Yep.
I want to go build a building. So I need a hammer. All right. Well, what kind of hammer do I want to get here? And I go through that whole process, and the AI is no different. So don't be afraid of it, folks. Find a way to put it to good use for yourself, because there is nothing to honestly to be afraid of. It's there to support us and assist us. I love this one phrase though, CJ. That someone says when we start talking about all these different innovations, whether it be in technology or medicine or anything else for that matter. Of course, my first question usually is, well, just because we can, does that mean we should? And then the other aspect of it is more philosophically, well, how do you know that God or the divine or what have you, this wasn't the path that the universe intended us to go with AI? I mean, we don't know. And down the road we go anyway, because if we waited to get the answer, we would never do anything.
Right.
Yeah,
the computers have changed lots, and the internet and everything else. So
absolutely,
we got to roll with a bunch.
Absolutely. I have 3 final questions for you that I ask all of my guests.
Okay.
But before I ask you those 3 questions, my friend, I'll keep you in suspense. I want to thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at all those times at richarddugan.com, with podcasts on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio. We're on YouTube and Rumble as well with the video cast. And I hope that you'll subscribe as well as click on notification. We also hope you'll go to Amazon and get a copy of my book, Choices, 5 Steps for Life. It's available in hardcover, paperback, and Kindle. And also, if you can support us financially, we use Zella as well as PayPal. And all you do is put in my email address, richard@richarddugan.com. If you can help us out financially, we would be gratefully appreciated. Thank you, thank you, thank you to those who have helped and to those who will help. And finally, we ask that you take some time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to spend some time going within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listening to that still small voice. With all of that being said, we now move into those final 3 questions for a very special guest. And the first of those is, who is C.J. Cook?
Me.
You.
A writer, a historian, an adventure in the South Pacific.
What gets you up in the morning?
Exercise, go to my computer and do a little writing, go out and walk 10,000 steps every day, and promote this book or write about the next one. I've got talks coming up on Eskridge, so I'm working on that vigorously. And the book officially comes out in August, but you can order it now online from my website that you mentioned.
Finally,
that's number 3.
Yeah, number 3 is, what was your best day?
Best day ever, huh? Boy, that's a tougher one. I think the first time I went to Bora Bora, my wife and I were on Raiatea, and we were flying over to Bora Bora. And this island group, if you go online, you'll see it, or in the book, there's pictures of it. This big, volcanic rim, turquoise lagoon with a volcano inside, and you land there, and it's very picturesque, and it was just a big, big thrill. Michener called it the most perfect island in the world when he wrote about it. He actually, just a quick note, Michener during the war was in the Navy, and the Navy assigned him to go to Bora Bora during the end of World War II, which was in 1944, to find out why none of the military guys wanted to go home after their time was up there. And then when he landed on Bora Bora, and there's 6,000 troops there, and very few of them wanted to go home because they had all these pretty Tahitians, this lovely lagoon. And he says, I think I got the answer in about 15 seconds up there. But go see Bora Bora, and you'll have an appreciation of the prettiest place, the prettiest island in the world.
We call that priorities. Hey, CJ, thank you again for joining us here on the program. I really appreciate your time and educating me, and I hope our listeners, on Robert Lee Eskridge.
Thank you very much for having me.
And I thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to Lal. Jeanette, I'm still listening. Dad, continue to be happy because I am. Smokey, I will see you on the other side. Mike, thanks for being in my life and letting me be in yours. To my dear brother, Michael, welcome to fatherhood, my friend. And to my dear friend, Zorro, aho, aho.